Welcome to episode 25 of Two Cents Tuesday. Congratulations to Sir Julian Robert Hunt and his family on the naming of the Shock to Groseley Highway, the Sir Julian Hunt Highway. Sir Julian has given a lifetime of service to the community of Groseley and to the people of our country. And for that, we owe him a huge debt of gratitude. Well done, the government of St. Lucia, in recognizing Sir Julian in this way. While on the subject of roads, kudos to DigiGov for making it possible for me to renew my driver's license online on Saturday. I completely forgot to go into the Ministry of Infrastructure to renew my driver's license last week because of a whole bunch of things that I was dealing with. And after an initial panic, when I thought that I would have been grounded for the weekend because my driver's license expired on Friday, I remembered DigiGov and got the process done online very quickly. Now, please, let's do the same thing for passport renewals. This week, I want to focus on the Pieto Management Area, or PMA as we call it, and the continuing controversy about the private development that is taking place in Usliv at the base of Go-Pieto. This is a contentious but complex issue. Let's look at a bit of history on this. When our Pietos achieved World Heritage status in 2004, we joined a prestigious list of locations around the world, such as Machu Picchu, Stonehenge, Victoria Falls, Robben Island, Yellowstone National Park, the Galapagos Islands, and the Taj Mahal, which have also achieved this status. Our Pietos achieved World Heritage status based on their outstanding universal value. According to UNESCO's guidelines, a World Heritage Site inscribed for its natural features, like our Pietos will, must contain superlative natural phenomena or areas of exceptional natural beauty and aesthetic importance. They must be outstanding examples representing major stages of Earth's history, including the record of life, significant ongoing geological processes in the development of landforms, or significant geomorphic or physiographic features. An inscription as a World Heritage Site means that the site has unique importance from a natural, cultural, historical, or scientific perspective, and must be preserved for the enjoyment of our civilization, our entire civilization, for generations. That is the tremendous honor that was bestowed on us by World Heritage status. Several developments have taken place within the Pieto Management Area since it was given World Heritage status, and some of these have caused concern to the World Heritage Committee. This is why, in 2010, the governor of St. Lucia had to promise the UNESCO World Heritage Committee at its 34th meeting in Brasilia that it would enforce a moratorium on all new developments in the Pieto Management Area, and it would undertake a limits of acceptable change study to guide the future management of the Pieto Management Area. Cabinet Conclusion number 645 of 2010, dated 22nd of July 2010, directed that, among other things, the limits of acceptable change study would be undertaken and an immediate moratorium on all new and unplanned developments within the PMA would take effect. However, in March 2011, that same cabinet, by Conclusion 189C of 2011, decided to allow the DCA to consider applications and grant approvals on a case-by-case basis within the PMA. This, in effect, lifted the moratorium. However, 2 months later, Cabinet by Conclusion number 343C, dated 16th May, withdrew Cabinet Conclusion number 189C, which inferred that the moratorium had been reinstated. However, 2 weeks later, on 30th of May 2011, Cabinet by Conclusion 404 of 2011 approved 4 new developments within the PMA. A few months later, in November 2011, by Conclusion number 1039 of 2011, Cabinet approved another development within the PMA. It should be noted that in addition to not honoring its commitment to halt all new developments, the government had also failed to conduct the limits of acceptable change study that was consistent with its promise to the World Heritage Committee. As a result, the World Heritage Committee, out of and I quote, extreme concern, unquote, that the government had reneged on its commitment, indicated that at its 36th session in St. Petersburg, Russia, it would place the Pito Management Area on the list of World Heritage in Danger. Paragraphs 5 and 6 of the draft decision that had been agreed to by the World Heritage Committee in advance of that meeting read, and I quote, paragraph 5, further recalls that the property's outstanding universal value may have already been significantly and potentially irreversibly compromised by past developments within the property. And paragraph 6 decides in conformity with paragraphs 177 and 180 of the operational guidelines to inscribe Pito Management Area St. Lucia on the list of World Heritage in Danger, end of quote. It should be noted that an inscription on the list of World Heritage in Danger is the precursor to the complete removal of a property as a World Heritage Site. That was a situation that I inherited when I became Minister for Sustainable Development in December 2011. At the end of June 2012, I traveled to St. Petersburg, Russia, to defend the World Heritage status of our Pito Management Area. This was a very tense meeting. Fortunately, I had the support of Mrs. Vera Lacoy from our UNESCO office in Paris. We engaged in intense lobbying of the committee members. I was allocated only 2 minutes to make my case before the World Heritage Committee. My defense was based on 4 pillars. 1, we were wrong. St. Lucia was wrong. The government was wrong, and we were sorry for failing to meet our commitment. 2, this was a transgression committed by the previous administration, and the new government of which I was a part was a government of its word. 3, we would reinstate the moratorium with immediate effect and conduct the limits of acceptable change study. And 4, this would never happen again. The World Heritage Committee, after hearing my defense, changed the St. Lucia decision and agreed to grant our Pito Management Area a stay of execution. It decided that it would give us up to the 1st of February 2013 to do the things to which we had previously committed, so that at the 37th session of the World Heritage Committee in 2013, the committee would consider whether the PMA should be inscribed on the list of World Heritage in Danger. I returned to St. Lucia a very relieved man, only to end up in hospital 2 weeks later for 3 days with a bleeding duodenal ulcer and find myself attached to 2 IV drips to treat a nasty infection of H. pylori that I picked up during my travels. That is why I say that I literally spilled blood in defense of our Pitos. After I'd recovered, I brought a memo to Cabinet to reinstate the moratorium and authorize the conduct of the limits of acceptable change study. Cabinet approved the request. I later went back to Cabinet with another memo reconstituting the Pito Management Area Advisory Committee, comprising senior representatives of several government agencies, as well as the Secretary General of the National Commission for UNESCO here in St. Lucia, the Director of the St. Lucia National Trust, a representative of the La Pointe Delce communities, that is the Choiseul part of the PMA, a representative of the Forges Libres community, Soufrière, a representative of the Soufrière Marine Management Authority, the Executive Director of the Soufrière Regional Development Foundation, and a representative of the tourism business sector in Soufrière. My ministry subsequently contracted a company known as the Landmark Practice to conduct the limits of acceptable change study. That company was recommended by the International Union for the Conservation of Nature. The limits of acceptable change study was approved by Cabinet and accepted by the World Heritage Committee as the definitive management plan for the Pito Management Area. As a result of our work, the World Heritage Committee removed the threat of danger listing our Pito Management Area. That limits of acceptable change study demarcated the PMA into 5 policy areas, 4 of which are land-based or terrestrial, and 1 is marine. 2 of the terrestrial areas are classified as no-build zones, Policy Area 1 and Policy Area 2. Policy Area 1 is the zone comprising Gros Pito, Petit Pito, and the ridge between the Pitos. However, even in this area, there is some flexibility. The limits of acceptable change report states that small-scale development in the Livroin River Valley, set back from the beach, will be considered if it meets in full the limits of acceptable change and design guide for the PMA World Heritage Site. Such development would be restricted to local needs and or for conservation purposes. It could, for example, be a scheme that provides opportunities for local employment, for accommodation, but only for local people and or for historic feature conservation. Policy Area 2 comprises the Sulphur Springs, and this area is marked for limited development opportunities only. The requirement here is that, and I quote, the existing natural setting of the Sulphur Springs will be preserved and enhanced. No new development is to be visible from the main viewing area. That is, the surrounding visible ridgeline shall remain free from development. End of quote. The limits of acceptable change study goes on to say that, quote, there will be opportunities to enhance the setting and visitor experience through the improvement of the existing visitor facilities. Such improvements will conform to the limits of acceptable change and design guide for the PMA World Heritage Site. End of quote. Policy Area 3 covers the coastal areas, Jalousie and Beauséjour, while Policy Area 4 consists of the settled areas and existing plantations. In these areas, development is permissible, providing it conforms to certain guidelines, all of which are very reasonable. Policy Area 5 is the maritime zone, and this area is to be protected absolutely from built development and infrastructure unless that development will assist in the protection of the marine zone. Example, for enhancing navigation, safety, marine research, buoyage, and minor signage interpretation. Which takes me to the ongoing development at the base of Gopito. My position on this is simple. It should not be permitted. End of discussion. From everything I've seen, some of this development falls within Policy Area 1, and the limits of acceptable change report is clear on what is permissible there. Let me repeat. Development must be restricted to local needs and or for conservation purposes. This could be a scheme that provides opportunities for local employment, for accommodation, but only for local people, and or for historic feature conservation. The limits of acceptable change study goes on to stipulate that, quote, such development would allow for the replacement of the existing ad hoc beach facilities with sustainably managed low-key beach facilities set back from the beach, all in accordance with the design guide, end of quote. Therefore, if this ongoing development does not conform to these guidelines, we will find ourselves in trouble, serious trouble, with the World Heritage Committee the next time we submit the mandatory State of Conservation report to that committee. And we may find that once again, we are threatened with the prospect of being listed as World Heritage in danger. I don't know what our explanation can be this time around. Managing land use within the Pito Management Area is a challenging and complex task. A large portion of the land in the PMA is privately owned. The entire PMA consists of 2,909 hectares or 7,188 acres of land, of which over 50% is publicly owned. The Crown lands include substantial areas of Pitipito, Gopito, and the Sulphur Springs. There is, in addition, the Queen's Chain, which comprises the area between the high water mark and a distance of 186.5 feet landward. Some areas of land were recently donated to the state. However, the remainder of the PMA is privately owned by individuals, estates, or companies. Now, government cannot stop the private sale of lands within the PMA. What it can do, however, is place restrictions on the type of development that is permitted within the PMA so that it conforms with the guidelines of the limits of acceptable change study. However, in order for the government to exercise the required control of the management and use of the land in policy areas 1 and 2, the no-build areas, these areas where development is not permitted, it would be advisable for the government to purchase the privately owned lots in these areas. The acquisition of land from private ownership by government would allow for quite a few things. First of all, it would allow for protection from encroachment of competing adverse land uses. Secondly, it would provide protection from man-made destruction. Thirdly, it would facilitate the preservation of the site and all its identifying features. Fourthly, It would allow for the maintenance of the PMA's visual integrity. 5th, it would make it possible to secure the area. 6th, it would allow for proper maintenance and upkeep of the area. And 7th, it would allow for the definition of the area. As you can imagine, however, these lands are among the most sought after in the country. As a result, land acquisition by the government would not be cheap. And in the current limited fiscal space that the government has to operate, this is almost certainly beyond the government's financial capacity. This is why the government must explore innovative means to raise the capital necessary for funding the acquisition of the critical lands in the Pito Management Area and for other vital natural resource management initiatives in our country that relate to water resources management, a very scarce resource, forest conservation, and biodiversity protection. Fortunately, there are several new and emerging financing mechanisms that make it easier to raise capital for conservation and environmental protection. There are conservation trust funds, green bonds, debt for climate and debt for nature swaps, sustainable capital and environmental investment funds, carbon credits, carbon investment funds, and partnerships, possible partnerships with private philanthropic organizations that can help the government raise the revenue, not only for securing the critical lands within the Pito Management Area, but also for some of the important natural resource management activities that must be undertaken. However, for this to happen, the government must first decide that the preservation and sustainable management of our scarce natural resources is one of its top priorities. I guess time and history will be the judge of that. Let's hope. Thank you for viewing another 2 Cents Tuesday. Have a good week, stay safe, and goodbye.